excited to introduce our all-star panel here today. So I'd love to introduce Erica, who is the Global Head of Developer Community Programs at Google, Sabrina, who's the Senior Manager of Community at MuleSoft, and Emily, who's the Open Source Community Manager at Mattermost. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yes,
Awesome.
thank you.
Okay, so to get the panel started, I'd love to learn a little bit more about each of you and how you actually started your career and got into DevRel. And I'd also love for each of you to share a fun fact about yourselves. I think, just something that folks maybe wouldn't find in your bio, reading it online. So let's kick it off with Sabrina. I see you up here first on my screen. So Sabrina, how did you get your career started and how did you get into DevRel?
So I started my career about 15 years ago, handling communications for an open source e-commerce software. And communications quickly turned into community. As the project was open source, we had a lot of people contributing to it. And developers became quickly my favorite audience because of their no fluff mindset. You can just tell them things how they are. And so that's how I got into DevRel. It just happened. And I'm now with MuleSoft. I've been with MuleSoft for 5 years. And I lead all of the community programs there. And I have a team that runs programs to engage developers and make sure they're successful with the platform.
Very cool. And a fun fact about yourself as well.
A fun fact, I love crafting, building things with my hands, in particular for my cats, because I love cats too, so I build furniture for them from scratch. So they basically own the house.
I love that. That's awesome. Erica, I'll go to you next. Can you share a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Erica. I'm based out of New York. And like Sabrina, I also started my career 15 years ago. So I actually joined Google, right out of college. And the road to DevRel took some time. I come from a non-technical background. And so I started out at Google in sales. And then I eventually, in San Francisco, eventually moved to London for a few years where I did sales strategy and operations. So I liked project management, and that was something that continued throughout the journey. But I realized I didn't love the content of the projects I was working on. So I started to do like side projects at Google, and I eventually did a rotation in Singapore, managing a program called Women on the Web, helping women start businesses online, and it was community-based. And I loved that. I loved the community piece. I loved education. I love the idea of peer-to-peer learning. And so that's when I shifted into developer relations and shifted into engineering. And that was about 7 or 8 years ago. And I focused on Indonesia, running developer training programs there, Android courses. And that's where I went to my first tech community events. And I realized that I loved that. I love being a part of communities. And so continued on that journey. And now I'm in New York. And here I'm leading the team that manages our Google developer programs, including Google Developer Groups and Google Developer Student Clubs. They're all community programs for developers where they can learn more about Google technology. And so, yeah, I've been here for 3 years. I love New York. And my fun fact is I played rugby in college for 4 years, and then I continued playing. So I played for about 15 years as a way to meet friends, build a community. I've been part of sports communities throughout my time, and so I did that. But now I've retired and I've switched to running. So I think that's a little bit safer.
Very cool. Thank you so much for sharing. And Emily, can you share a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Emily Cook. I'm the open source community manager at Mattermost. So my trajectory into DevRel is kind of weird. So I started off as a developer, like right out of college. I worked at a really large company, like over tens of thousands of people in IT. And I transitioned into our DevOps tooling team. So like my role was to go around to different teams and like assess their needs, assess their tooling needs, like the processes, go to vendors and, talk with them and see if like what they, offered would help them, and then go back to the developers and be like, hey, we got this tool, and, prototype it for them and stand it up for them. So I was researching like something like how to best communicate developers' needs or something. And I came across like DevRel sources. So I think like John O'Bacon's like YouTube channel came up or something. So I was, researching how to, best do that, and then came across DevRel and was like, this is really cool. I really like this concept. And then, decided that that's what I wanted to pursue. And then I went to GitLab as a developer advocate. And then I worked there for two and a half years, and then transitioned to Mattermost, where now I'm our open source community manager, which is like a little bit outside of traditional DevRel. So I manage all of our like open source contributors, our internal events like Hacktoberfest coming up. I saw someone was from like hacktoberfest.com in the chat, I think. So Hacktoberfest is like the big thing coming up. Hackathons, meetups, helping our open source maintainers with anything they need, and all of that stuff. So yeah, so that's what I do now. A fun fact about me, I actually have my teaching license. I am a certified high school teacher in computer science and math and physics. I thought about transitioning to teaching at one point, and then COVID, I got it in 2019. COVID hit, decided maybe this wasn't the right time. So, but yeah, so certified teacher. I'm really big into like tech education, especially for like women and minority underrepresented groups. So passionate about that.
That's really cool. It's interesting with a lot of these events. I run these types of events for various industries, and that's kind of a commonality. There's actually quite a few past teachers or folks that wanted to go into teaching that ended up in community. I think there's a pretty big overlap. And even on our Bevy team internally, we have quite a few former teachers. So it's a really cool coincidence. So Emily, you shared a little bit about the types of programs that you're running as part of your role. I'm really curious from Erica and from Sabrina as well, like what does community mean within your team? I know everybody defines it so differently, and what kind of programs are you running? So Erica, let's kick it off with you this time.
Sure. So community to me in general, just it means a group of people who come together in some space, whether it's in person or virtual, to learn and share, and they have some sort of a common interest that's anchoring them there. It's ideally a place where they feel it's a safe space where they can share ideas and learn together. And in terms of what I do in the community space, so specifically, I've been leading a program called Google Developer Student Clubs, and I see that we have we also, the short term is GDSC. We have a lead from Marechal, so it's great to see you here. And so basically, this is a community program for university students. So once a year, we select students can apply to lead a club and start one on their campus. And if they're selected, they start the club. We support them with, leadership training and content and resources and some mentorship. And then it's really up to the students to define the vision of their club and build this community the way that they see fit and that works for them and what the students want to learn. So they might run like Android workshops, or once a year we have a solution challenge. It's a project competition where we encourage students to build a project that solves a local problem, and we focus on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals this year. And it's just a way to solidify learning. When you're building a project, pulling in different bits of technology, that really helps you learn, and it's also good for your resume for the students. So that's been fun. I've been very inspired by some of the projects that I've seen, helping people find clean water in Cameroon was one, and many others. So that's the student program. And we also have Google Developer Groups. It's a similar community program for professional developers, and students are welcome to join as well. So yeah, it's been really fun. I love communities. I really see it as a place, especially with the Student Clubs program. It's a place for peer-to-peer learning where students can, it's important to learn from professors and in class and learn theory, but this provides a space for them to learn from each other, build projects, and put some practical experience into action. So, and community is a great space to do that. So I always encourage folks to be part of communities.
Very cool. Sabrina, and what about you? What does community mean for your team at MuleSoft, and what kind of programs are you running?
Yes, so I have pretty much the same definition as community as Erica. Basically, it's people coming together because they have something in common, either a product interest or a common challenge. And I would add that what makes a community special is that people care about each other and they support each other in succeeding. And where I see my team's mission is really to bring them the tool, so to our users or to community members, to be able to do just that. So meeting with each other, building connections, learning and supporting each other, so we can have a thriving community. And so the programs we run to achieve this, the largest one is our Meetup program. So we have about 150 groups worldwide. And my team is here to enable local volunteers who organize events to support and teach best practices to our community members. And it's been growing a lot, especially since 2020. We were not expecting this, but with events turning virtual, our community really has grown a lot. We also have other programs that are more around evangelism and advocacy, like ambassadors and mentors. So our community ambassadors are the best of the best community members, the ones who contribute the most and are the most knowledgeable on the product. And they really act as role models within the community. And they're always the first ones to know when something's gonna happen on the product or there is a new best practice that popped up. So they can share their knowledge with the community and really act as mentors. And then we have the mentors program, which is kind of the same thing, but at a larger scale. Mentors can apply for our program and they share their experience. So usually they are certified on the product, and we give them the tools to go out there, share what they've been building with the product, what they've learned along the way, so they can really empower more users. And then we have smaller programs around content creation. We're always looking for developers who know something special about the product and want to share it. So it's really all about learning and sharing knowledge.
I feel like that's a really great theme. Very, very cool. A lot of programs that you're running. So Emily, I think you bring a really interesting perspective to this panel, having actually been a developer yourself. So as a former developer, do you have any insights around, like, first of all, why developers should actually join a community? And as somebody who's kind of in this profession now, how can folks gain the trust of developers and market to them in a way that's authentic?
So that's a big question. So the first one, why should developers join a community? Kind of piggybacking off of Erica and Sabrina's last answers as to what makes a community. It's people coming together with shared interests. So community. You think of why you would join a normal community, like a community in your neighborhood. It's the support structure. It's the events you can join. It's all of that kind of stuff that you would think about like a community, just focused on development, which if you are a developer, that's something that that interests you. So I think you should join a developer community to gain the networking connections, to get that you would in a typical community, gain skills, grow your skill set, join events that may interest you. A lot of our like recognition program is very much on like the intrinsic motivations, like, growing skill set, growing networking, growing your resume, just, helping advance your professional career. But also, for a lot of people, this is a hobby. This is a hobby also. So, I mean, it's kind of why I would join why I think you should join a developer community. It's why you would join any community. If you knit, why would you join a knitting community? So, as to how to gain developers' trust, that really depends on who you're talking about. So, like, if you're talking about, I don't really consider DevRel like necessarily marketing or necessarily like sales. I think it's kind of, its own sort of thing. So in DevRel, I think the way to gain trust is really to just be authentic and to really like understand what does set you apart from marketing and what does set you apart from sales, because marketing and sales can feel very like transactional. So I guess to like reverse engineer this, it's like, why would you not trust somebody, right? And it's because you think that they're selling you something and they may not necessarily like deliver on it, right? It's a very transactional relationship. Like if I am a marketer for Coca-Cola, it's like I make an ad that makes you want a Coke, and then you're like, okay, do I have the budget for a Coke? I do. Here's money, and now I have a Coke, and like boom, like a relationship's over, right? But like software doesn't work like that, right? When you're talking to a developer, it's not just like, okay, like here's a product, and what's my budget? Do I have the money for it? Okay, here's the money. You give me product. It's like they're also thinking about like, what's this going to take to implement? Are we going to have to migrate from another tool? Are we going to have to onboard people? Like, are we going to be able to sell the onboarding process to people? Like, working in tooling, like that was a big thing, like trying to get people on board with like adopting a new tool. That's a whole new skill set for people. That, like, what's an upgrade process going to look like? Like there's never tools or never like products where it's like, it's purely going to be like, okay, you buy it and then you implement it and like all great, nothing's ever going to go wrong, right? Like, you're never going to introduce any new features. I'm never going to have to onboard new people. Like, it just doesn't work like that. So I think being authentic and seeing it as like a symbiotic relationship versus a transactional one, where it's, I'm giving them a product, they're giving me money or, whatever. But then if they have issues, we're going to take that feedback and use it to make our tool better, and then like that is, worth it for us as a company, right? It's not just like, here, there's money, like buy, never, have fun, have fun implementing it. So yeah, I think seeing it as symbiotic is, the main thing.
I really like that. I feel like, yeah, you touched on some really important themes there, authenticity and kind of co-creating with your community. Erica, is there anything you want to add there in terms of like why developers should join a community and what benefits they would gain from it?
Yeah, I think all developers should join a community. Honestly, I think it really helps. Like I think in general, it's good to be part of different types of community. For me, it's like I have my sports communities. I'm training for a marathon, so that's a group I can run and exercise with. In the past, I was part of Boss Babes. It was a community for women, mostly in tech, and a lot of them were entrepreneurs. And that was my space to meet other inspiring women, and it really energized me. And so I love that experience. And then also being part of tech communities is a great place for people to, with a shared interest in tech and maybe even doubling down on a specific area of technology and focusing on that within the community is great. But in general, it's a good place to learn and share ideas, maybe meet other network and meet other people who maybe you can build a project together. I've met people who've met through a community event and started a project together. I've met people who've built a startup together. And I encourage people to also be active participants in community. I think you'll get more out of it by being active, and ways you can be active are, just asking questions, engaging and talking to people. If you have an area of expertise, speaking at an event in the future, maybe offering to mentor and support others, or offering to volunteer and help organize an event. Those are ways that you can be active. One inspiration for communities for me is my dad has been part of ISACA. It's a securities community for over 40 years. And he's been through that participation journey of, he was a member, he's, led panels, and then he became like the president, and then he became the registrar, and he's just always just like engaged in some way. And now he's helping, some back end stuff and helps with other things. So that's been an inspiration to me, of just a way that you find a community of people with interesting ideas. This gives him a lot of purpose and value, and he loves it, being engaged, sometimes just being a participant. And so I think that there's a lot of value people can learn from others. Actually, at a startup community event, I met another woman who said, "Hey, I want to start a community for women in tech." This was in Singapore. I said, "Hey, me too." And then we just did it. We started Geek Girl Meetup Singapore, and we managed that for 3 years. We built a core team, and we hosted events for women, a lot of like design thinking workshops. And that was at another event. We just said, "Hey, we want to do this," and we did it. So I think it's a good place to meet other people, share ideas, and build things together.
That's incredible. I love hearing stories like that. Also, having built a community myself, just like seeing those connections kind of like just happen, and seeing people stay in touch and build future things together. It's really incredible. So I think you touched on a really important theme, is, like once we get people into the community, you want to start to get them to become more and more active in it. So Sabrina, do you have any thoughts to share around that? Like, how do you encourage people to get more active within the community programs that you're running, and to kind of progress through them?
So, and that's also going to answer kind of the previous question around the benefits of joining a community. To engage developers more and more, we really try to emphasize on why they should do it. So what's in it for them? Beyond the learning and beyond the networking, it's also about building their personal brand. So you meet with other developers, you start making a name for yourself, you showcase your skills, and that ultimately gives you more value on the market. That really resonates with MuleSoft, where the market for MuleSoft developers is really, really hot. So if you get visibility and can showcase some certifications, you're going to have many, many recruiters reaching out to you. So yes, by showcasing these benefits, we encourage more developers to step up, participate in our forums, on our socials, creating content, and also attending and speaking at meetups. That's really the main thing we do to drive engagement.
That's really great advice. So I think a question that's really top of mind for folks in community, and especially in DevRel, is measuring the success of your programs. I already see some questions coming through about it in the Q&A. So great question here from Waleed. What is the most unusual metric you track for your communities, and why? I ask because traffic isn't necessarily the greatest thing to measure and relate to value, so I'd love to hear some curveballs. So let's start with Emily for this question. How are you sort of measuring the success of your programs, and especially being on a smaller team right now building out this program? What are things that are important for you to track?
Yeah, so we actually, practically, we just started using Orbit. So we use the Orbit model, if anyone's familiar with that tool. So we just implemented it in June, so I'm still kind of learning it. But that's where most of our metrics come from for me, is the open source community manager. So my metrics specifically are, so my main one is how many people Mattermost community server and how many people are engaging, because Mattermost is like if anyone doesn't know, we're an open source, an open core collaboration platform. Like, like think Slack, that type of thing. So we have a community server. So my metrics, which may be like somewhat unique, are the number of new people joining, and the amount of volume we have in some specific channels, like our peer-to-peer help channel, our contributor channel. Those are where my main metrics come from. And then also like post-event, like Hacktoberfest, like how many contributors we'll get for that. Any hackathons that we do, how many new contributors we get for that. And like a big metric that drives the biggest metric that I kind of consider my success is how many converts we have from like new people joining our community to like come down, if anyone's familiar with like the orbit, like the outside orbit, like people like are people are observers, how many people we can pull down into like the advocacy, the top contributor roles. So yeah, I think that's where my metrics typically come from.
Very cool. Big fans of Orbit here at Bevy as well. So thanks so much for sharing. Erica, I see you kind of nodding along there. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts around how you measure success and what that sort of looks like at Google.
Yeah, so a few things. I guess these aren't that unique, but one is reach, just how many people are coming to these community events. We look at how many unique clubs or communities that we have around the world. And right now for the student program, there's over 1,500 in over 100 countries. And for Google developer groups, there's over 1,000 in over 145 countries. So that's something we look at and keep an eye on. We would love to reach even more countries. And there's some countries we're not in yet, and we get regular requests to go there, and I'd love to. And we do look at, I guess I'm trying to think of any like unique or different ones, but I mean, one thing that we do care a lot about is stories, sharing stories of impact. People who've been impacted by the community or because of the community, they learned, something new for the first time. We just shared a story about a woman she's a Google Developer Student Club lead. She became passionate about machine learning, and eventually she became certified in TensorFlow, and was one of the first women in Egypt to go through that certification. And so we love sharing those stories, and we have a metric around, sharing a couple stories like that a month. We have blog posts that we share. And the point of that is to inspire more people and to get more people excited about building projects that help other people. And the solution challenge project competition, we look at like number of projects submitted. I'm personally interested in our students combining different technology together. Maybe they're combining like, Android and Firebase. They're not just using one or the other. So that just shows a bit more that they've learned a bit more, and they're able to combine the two and think about how to integrate that. And lastly, engagement, like how active are they? Are they running events or engaging with the community regularly every few months? And so those are the main metrics we look at. Yeah, kind of like community health network metrics.
That's really cool. I love what you said about stories. I see that kind of echoed here in chat by Mark, that stories are the strongest way to show value to a community. Yeah, I couldn't agree more there. So that's really amazing that you're doing that. Sabrina, what about on your end? How are you measuring success? Are there any unique metrics that you look at?
Yes, so unique, I don't know. But in terms of community metrics, we clearly focus more on quality versus quantity. So when it comes to meetups, for example, we're not really looking at how many groups we have. We look at how many events these groups have, attendees they get, because having a community is good, but having a vibrant community is even better. So when people look at it from the outside, they see it's really active and members are engaged. So we're looking at our groups, frequency of events, how many developers sign up for more than one event. So how many come back after their first meetup, meaning they got something good from the first one and they want more. Something we look at, not because we care about it in terms of success, but more about business value and getting buy-in from management, is impact on pipe. We're able to track what's the impact on pipe generation and pipe maturation from our meetups. So we can show that these developer events have an impact on the business in terms of numbers along the way. And something more specific to our community forums, of course, we look at how many members are active, etc., but we really care about the average time to first answer. So when someone asks a question, we don't want them to wait too long. So we really keep an eye on this metric.
That's a really interesting metric. Very cool. So you touched on getting management buy-in. I think that's a very important theme for this. So I'd love to get the other panelists to weigh in as well if you have any advice around getting management buy-in. So Emily, let's kick it off with you, especially as you're building out your programs. How have you been going about getting management buy-in for some of the things you want to try?
Well, so it definitely depends on who in management I'm talking to. So there are people in our like MLT team and our management leadership team, I think that's what that stands for. Our MLT team, who are like very data driven. So like for them, I'll show them, the metrics of the number of people, joining our community, the number of people who are like active in our peer-to-peer help channel, and kind of phrase it as like, look, growing our community has, decreased our need for support, not necessarily like all support, because we still have like enterprise support, but like, it, helps us kind of, smooth over some of these problems that, we may have for like our paying customers, because we are an open core company. So, and then we have someone who just kind of generally gets the idea of like, a happy, vibrant community is going to help the tool and like help our, I hate to say image, but kind of like help our branding and help our our tool in general. So when I talk to them, it's a lot easier. I can just be like, look at the the individuals who are joining our our program and like what they're bringing to us. So I think it really depends on your audience. I do a lot of tailoring what I'm saying to who I'm talking to. So yeah, and I mean a lot of that's just like make sure you get to know them, like have one-on-one talks with them, so you like know what kind of leadership person they are. So
absolutely, that's really great advice. I think when we talk about measuring the success and getting management buy-in for our programs, on the flip side of that, sometimes things kind of they might fall flat, or they don't work the way that you thought that they would. So Erica, I'm wondering if you have any advice around that, like if you've seen like through any of the programs that you've tried throughout your career that maybe haven't worked. How do you go about evaluating that, and like how do you decide if you should try it again or move on to something else?
Yeah, that's definitely happened. And there's been things that we've tried or piloted that didn't work that well or didn't hit the metrics, but there is, I do try to, it's good just to, I always do retrospectives after every project I do. And usually what I do is we document like start, stop, continue, and in silence, everybody's in the room and they just type out things, because sometimes if you're just discussing, the person who tends to be the loudest in the group will get a lot of the play time and everyone will anchor towards them and what they're saying. So we do that in silence, and then people can like +1 or comment in on that. And then we have a discussion after that. So, I do that for the projects that I'd say have failed and the ones that were great. And I think that's such a good process. Like, even if something has not worked, I always want to make sure that I've documented it, why, and like, what should we start, stop, continue? And if what we should stop is the program itself and we should sunset it, like, I mean, that's hard for me, but there's been times where there was a program I was managing that it didn't make sense to be on our team. It didn't align with our OKRs and our core work and what we should be doing. And so that was one of the toughest things. I had to find another team that made more sense to house this team, house this program. And we just realized it was not working on our team. And so that was really tough for me. And I thought, let me just really fight for this and make this work and fit this into the goals. And then I had to like take a step back and be like, okay, let me look at this from a higher level perspective. Does it make sense? Is there another team that is better for this program? And also, is there a better way I could use my resources and time? And so we had to let it go and move it to a different team that made more sense at the time. So sometimes it's just acceptance and being open and like, hey, it's okay if there's mistakes or it just doesn't fit. You don't need to force fit it, and be able to let it go, but also be able to like really reflect and dig into why and document that. And I think you can just like learn so much from that process. That's been helpful.
That's really fantastic advice. I think, yeah, retrospectives are so important for any type of program that folks are running. So thank you for sharing that advice. So I think, a question that's really top of mind for folks is the future of community events, the future of DevRel events. As we're kind of moving through the pandemic, everybody's kind of talking about, hybrid events and the future of what these types of events could look like. So I'm really curious to get some of your thoughts around it. Are there any innovative formats that you've tried, or like how are you thinking about the future of your programs? So let's kick it off with Sabrina. Yeah.
Yes. So for us, we've been very successful with virtual events over the past 2 years. And we're starting to see some groups getting back in person where we can do it safely. We get the question a lot about hybrid events. It's like the trendy term of the moment. And frankly, I don't have a strong opinion on them yet. I think on one side, people are eager to go back in person and build connections again in the same room. But on the other side, it means decreasing the reach of the event, decreasing the size, the number of people who can join them. And adopting a hybrid approach means having new logistics to take care of. So how do you broadcast, record, like how do you ensure people who are online are as engaged as the people who are in the room? And so I don't have the answers yet to these. I'm also wondering, considering we have limited resources in the team, should we focus on pushing virtual events that are large and successful, or should we try to restart smaller events? Like, I'm not sure yet. I'm waiting for others to try and see.
I think that's sort of a common trend that I'm seeing. I don't think anybody has the answer yet. I think like another panel that I ran, somebody had a really interesting insights around hybrid events, is that a lot of people think that for it to be a hybrid event, that has to be happening simultaneously, but we don't have to think of it that way. You can do, a big virtual event where it makes sense. You could do smaller in-person things in regions where it's allowed, and it doesn't have to be happening at the same time. I thought that was an interesting insight from someone. Erica, how are you thinking about the future of your programs and the types of events that your community is running?
Yeah, so there are a number of events that are still virtual, but we are seeing more and more around the world shifting to in-person. We have seen some hybrid ones. There are definitely more logistics. And Marcia, that's I never actually thought about that, the fact that it doesn't have to be at the same time. So that's interesting. It's something we can explore. I did see one event that it was like it was a workshop. It was an Android workshop that they did in person, and then they were also streaming it virtually. That seemed to work well, but I've heard from others there can be some challenges. How do you keep an in-person group engaged? You want to engage with them, but also how do you keep the virtual folks in the loop? And feeling included and have that. And it's like there's two audiences that you have to really think about and engage with. So I think can be tough. But I think in the future, there are going to be, I feel like we won't go back ever to the same way that it was with in-person. Like, I feel like some people have gotten used to it, and it does allow folks to reach more people. I've heard from some folks like, oh, I have people from, India joining my events, and I'm based in the US. And so more people are joining and listening. I'm not sure how engaged people are. I wish there was a way to kind of test out like how engaged is it. It's in person, they're there. You can meet and network, and there's other value you gain from it. I think when we can do networking, like what we're doing today, like shortly, like in breakout rooms, that's pretty cool. That's a way to network and engage, but it isn't exactly the same as in person. But I do all of that to say, I think, in virtual events are going to be here to stay. And for a while, because now people have realized you don't have to drive or somewhere or take the train somewhere. It's just you sit in your home and can do it. So you have access to more communities and events. But I know people do miss the in-person events. I'm excited for in-person events again soon.
Yeah, that's really, really true. I think, like with creating virtual events or hybrid events that folks are trying out, I think you really have to be conscious of not like trying to just like recreate what you've done in the past with in-person events. It's not going to be the same experience. But there's some really incredible things that you could do virtually. And it really does open up the accessibility and the reach of the events. So really, really great points that you brought up. Emily, what about you? How are you thinking about the future of your programs? Any new formats that you're trying out?
Yeah, so it's in terms of like insights, I don't think I could add, like those were all like really great. But in terms of like things that we've tried and like innovations, we did actually, so this has been an interesting question for us because Mattermost is a fully remote company. So virtual internal like events are like typically always virtual. But we do have, a yearly meetup we call MatterCon, where we all meet in person and we invite our top community members. We have like it's called our stars program. So like anyone who is a Mattermost star gets an invite. Obviously couldn't do that because of the pandemic. So the person on our team who plans that was like, what if we sent everyone Oculus headsets and we did a VR MatterCon? And so we're like, you know what? Like, let's go for it. Like VR headsets are like, we got the Oculus Quest 2s. So they're like 200 or something. So we sent them to all of the people in our company and we sent them to our top contributors. And for a week, we just did like VR. We did kind of a mix of like pre-recorded Zoom, talks or whatever. And then we would stream them in an app called Spatial. In VR, so you could join that spatial room and like watch it, or you could just like watch it in Zoom if you don't want to do that. And then we did like team building things like Beat Saber tournaments, and we did like breakout rooms where like you would all sit in there with your little virtual avatar and in virtual conference rooms, and that was really cool. And if anyone wants to like learn more about it or hear more about like how it went, we have a podcast called What Matters. And we streamed a recording of our podcast during the event. So I think it's called MatterCon or whatever. So we are thinking moving forward that anyone who, gets up to our STAR program, we'll send them an Oculus headset and we'll continue doing these events. We have continued doing them. Every other Friday, we do a community team watch party. So like someone will like bring a video that has to do with like community building. We'll go into spatial and we'll sit around and watch it and then discuss it. And so we do that every other Friday, and it's open to community members. So yeah, I mean that has been really, really cool. Shout out to Hannah Park at Mattermost. It was her idea. Very brilliant. So
I love the creativity there. That is so cool. That's such a unique, like I haven't heard of anybody doing that, sending a VR set. And I just think that's incredible. You're getting a lot of love in the chat as well. That is awesome. So I see a lot of great questions have come through in our Q&A. So we're going to jump over to those. Let's try to kind of do like a rapid fire with these questions so that we can get through as many as possible. So I see a question here from Tony. How would I get my fellow students in my university to become more confident in their skills and have the courage to do outreach and try things that might seem to be overwhelming, but might just be right for them? It seems that some of his fellow students there are rather a little bit too meek, even though they have a lot of really great skills. Erica, so I'll go to you with that question. I know you're really passionate about universities and getting students involved. Do you have any advice there?
Yeah, and I've heard this before from other students, and yeah, becoming more confident in their skills and the courage to outreach. So I do think it helps sometimes to be part of a team so that you're doing something together and it doesn't all fall on you. And so I think joining up with a few other students and just, I guess you have to be a bit proactive and just say, hey, let's work on a project together. Let's solve for something. Is there something anyone's really passionate about, or something that happened to you recently that's relevant, or is somebody interested in like climate change or anything? But doing it with a few other people, I think can help people with, maybe a common interest or just ready to work on a project together, a diverse team, and each person has their own skills and strengths that they're bringing to the table. So I think it can sometimes help to have a buddy or a team to do it together. And it does help having a mentor. And I know that can be hard to find a mentor sometimes at the university. And it's kind of hard to say, hey, will you be my mentor? But seeing if there's, I like the term like friend tour. Like I have friend tours. Actually, a couple of the women that I know through Boss Babes, one in particular, I consider her a friend tour. Like I found her energy very contagious, and it was very much like, wow, Erica, great job on that, keep going. And she was always like a promoter of me and connected me to an opportunity actually to be part of Women at Google and join the leadership team when it wasn't something I thought about doing because I just moved to New York. She said, no, do it. I think you have good opinions. I see you're proactive, just do it. And so she kind of pushed me into it, and I've been engaged ever since. So having people like that who can kind of encourage you and are positive, that helps. And having other frienders, and you can kind of coach and guide each other. Everybody has something to share. Everybody has different strengths and skills and passions and interests. So maybe that confidence will build over time when people just reflect and realize like what are their strengths and their passions, and just really double down on that, and just try to be positive and encourage and guide each other, because everyone goes through challenges. Everyone has imposter syndrome at some point. And if we have these friend tours or friends who are positive and encouraging people, that can really help. And doing things in teams can help.
That's such great advice. I love that term, friender. I've never heard that before, and I have so many of those now that I think of it. I value them so much. Very cool. Yeah, Tony, good luck. I hope that helps, and some of your friends do get more involved. So I see a question here from Abhilash. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. How do you plan your events to ensure maximum participation? Yeah, anybody could jump in here. So I guess I can kick it off as well. With all of our events, whether it's a more intimate event like this that's very industry specific, or some of the larger style events that we do that are a little bit more broad in topic, we always make sure to have some kind of networking, whether it's random breakout groups or using our networking tab in our conference platform, where we have specific themes if it's like a much larger group and there's different topics that we want to cover. Also, if you have, if networking is sort of the focus of your event, and you have a significant amount of time set aside for it, it's always great to have somebody who's kind of a moderator within that networking table or the breakout room to really like encourage participation and make sure that everybody has a chance to speak. So yeah, that would be some of my advice there. If anybody else wants to jump in with some of their thoughts, we can do that, or we can jump over to the next question.
Yeah, I mean, just I would also make sure, like, if you're running an event, getting internal buy-in, maybe from like your engineering team or whatever, and like trying to get help from people, you know, within your company to like help, like, you know, provide mentorship, or, you know, just, you know, attending the events, you know, you know, asking questions that may, you know, we have some questions that we have an kind of event onboarding for anyone in our like internal team who wants to participate in events, and they've got kind of like, you know, how to start a conversation with somebody, like, you know, how, you know, introducing yourself can like help, you know, get like what sort of things to introduce yourself with, and like get people, you know, acquainted with you, and yeah, I think that events that have, you know, buy-in from everyone in the company, and participation from, you know, people within the company to keep it active helps a lot.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. Question here from Brett, and I'll go to Sabrina for this one. How do you typically keep the conversation going after events take place, just to make sure that the conversation doesn't fall off the radar?
So we have different solutions for that. We have discussion groups in our forum. So it's an online place for people to meet after an event and keep the discussion going. We also have a Slack workspace that's dedicated to our community. And yeah, same thing, it's more instantaneous than the forums. And so people usually like to use it to keep chatting or keep the conversation going. Socials as well, we have active groups on LinkedIn and Facebook. So it really depends on the local culture and habits. We see some countries are more into using Facebook, others are more into using LinkedIn or Slack. So that's why we have a presence everywhere.
Very cool. Great advice. So another question here from Tony. How do you deal with conflicting personalities and priorities between members in a community? I think that one kind of ties into creating a code of conduct for community as well. Erica, do you want to grab this one?
Yeah, sure. And this definitely comes up around the world. We see this happening from time to time. I think having a good code of conduct is important. And at the beginning of events, we encourage the community leaders to share this with their communities. Like, there's usually a slide that's like, be engaged and respect each other in the conversation, and understand everyone comes from different experiences and has different backgrounds, and let's respect that. And there's something wonderful in that, and having such a diverse group of people. So let's respect each other's opinions and listen. And so we do have the code of conduct, and we try to encourage the community leaders to remind folks of that. And we do see this sometimes even in like the core leadership team. We always say, hey, build a core team of people with diverse backgrounds. And so we try to coach and guide the community leaders about this, of making sure, you know, the core team feels valued. You're working towards like the same vision together, that everyone has a say, and there's respect, and people listen to each other. Thanking and recognizing people after something goes well, and saying thank you is important. And sometimes people forget that. It's like, phew, the event's done and we're over. And then it's like, wait, we have to have the thank you time. We have to have the retrospective, and we have to recognize people. And that's an important part to remember. And I think just people getting to know each other and learning more about people's lives. I mean, people don't have to share too many details that they don't feel comfortable sharing, but at least building that rapport and understanding there is this connection, that everyone just wants to help other people. They want to build this community or build this project to do something good. And so trying to remember that. So we do a lot of that coaching and guiding with the different community leaders, because it inevitably does come up.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I think it's so easy to just kind of like move on to the next event or the next thing in your program, but it's so important to take that time to really like appreciate what you just accomplished and to say thank you to those that participated and made it what it is. So we're coming up almost to the end of time for the panel portion. We'll end off with one last question here from Eric Chang. This one is directed towards Emily, but Sabrina, Erica, feel free to jump in here as well. How can DevRel communities be more engaging and relevant for women and other underrepresented groups?
So we actually have just started our like internal diversity and inclusion program. So I may actually pass this off to Erica, because I think you have probably more actual experience with this.
Oh, Erica, you're on mute.
Sure. Sorry, I was on mute. And thanks, Eric, for the question. So yeah, so how can DevRel communities be more engaging and relevant for women and underrepresented groups? I think it helps to have basically having more women, for example, be speakers at events on panels. Actually, we have 4 women here, and that's pretty cool to see. And so I think when more women can see themselves or see the path and see like, oh, okay, cool, this person is leading this, and we've had a similar story or journey, or we're both women, whatever that common ground is, I think that's helpful. And I think we always encourage, when people are building like leadership teams or groups that manage these community programs, we encourage them to make sure that it's a diverse group of people, and making sure there's women in the group or people from different countries or backgrounds if possible. And so that helps to have someone who's an advocate to make sure that there is, relevant content, and also getting feedback from the audience and the members in the community to check in on how they're doing, and asking them directly what kind of content do they want to hear more about and learn, and sharing those stories of women that were impacted by the community. And we have blog posts, the one I shared earlier about the woman in Egypt who became a TensorFlow expert. She went to a certification, sharing her story to hopefully inspire other people to join that. But I think if people can see themselves, on a panel, that can also help with that process.
Yeah, that's so important. Awesome. Thank you so much for answering that. And I just want to say a huge thank you to all of our panelists here today for being here with us today and for sharing your insights. Really appreciate it. And I learned so much from each of you. And I think our audience and community here did as well.